Yo, what's up?
We're canceling Christmas. Shut it all down now.
Now, today we're going to be talking all things death predictions, characters ending up in jail, or whatever rarely happens in the world of power, characters riding off into the sunset, or maybe even having to leave because they've lost everything from loved ones, family, business, and also friends. Maybe some characters like Tommy also have their eyes on expanding, which is something I briefly mentioned in my Tommy and Shanti breakdown. Shanti running the operation in Chicago for Tommy. That's the topic of discussion for today's breakdown, because I still believe there will be a very mixed ending to Force. Gary Lennon did tease a bloodbath, he did mention the penultimate episode is also a heartbreaker, and he did also tease that he has left some threads open that he could pull into the world of power at some point in the future. We're definitely in for a very mixed ending across the board. Now, so far we've seen the death of Marquez and a couple of the Marquez cartel members in episode 1, Mateo in episode 2 who was another member of the Marquez cartel, along with Chavo and the DSDs. There was also Roberto Ortega's uncle in episode 3, along with Nutty Boy and a member of the 9-7s during the robbery from D-Mac and Marshall. Claudia also killed Lady Z while she was in jail. In episode 4 there was Rashawn, the leader of the SODs. In episode 5 we said goodbye to Zamos and the Yardies, along with Claudia Flynn. In episode 6 a bunch of Albanians got lit up by Vic Flynn at the Irish bar. And in episode 7, Stacey Marks got her Christmas cancelled. So that brings us up to speed over to episode 8, 9 and 10. Who dies, who goes to prison, and who survives come the end of Power Book 4 Force Season 3. Now we are going to start with Tommy's family. I think that's probably the most obvious one, which many of us would have seen coming the moment we saw the official trailer way back in October. We saw this scene in the official trailer, we saw the funeral scene, which we are still yet to see. That probably comes in episode 9 because of the events of episode 8. JP, in my opinion, is definitely gone. We've got Jannard who looks like to be in JP's house, he is going to be pulling the trigger, and this will no doubt set off a chain of events that will lead to an utter onslaught and bloodbath in Chicago, because there is no way Tommy just sits back and takes the loss of yet another brother. But with this death of JP, it will be a heartbreaking moment, no doubt. I do think Tommy will be at Shanti's gym when he gets the call. D-Mac will also need to learn about his father's death, and so will Kate. This is going to happen at a time where things were really going well for the family. We saw D-Mac and JP reconnect earlier on in the season, and in episode 7, they definitely look like more of a family. There was a lot of love in this room. For a change, we had a happy family dinner scene, but we know these happy moments rarely ever last in the world of power, and I do think it's going to cause pure devastation for everybody involved.
Tommy, make him suffer.
This is probably the aftermath as well, where she tells Tommy to make them suffer, and where he asks D-Mac if he's ready. And I do feel it is going to hit D-Mac the most, because I do think we all know it is his fault. I do think King Kilo is also released soon. That has to happen because technically if they are taking episode 10 in a completely new direction, with episode 9 being the finale of Force per se, then King Kilo definitely has to be released soon. And that's what I think will trigger JP's death. I do think King Kilo will want D-Mac dead, but when JP's in the way, he gets taken out. I did also raise the possibility of Jannard turning the gun on King Kilo too, because there are 2 different shots of Jannard, and even when King Kilo is released, I do think his freedom will be very short-lived. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on in episode 8 as well as JP. Both JP and King Kilo are definitely on my hit list. Now, in terms of the rest of Tommy's family, which includes D-Mac and Kate, I do think we can include Maria in Tommy's family as well, but we will get to her a bit later on. With Kate, I really hope they don't go there, especially because you still have Kate still trying to make an effort to change. When D-Mac called Kate in episode 7, she was at her AA meeting, so I really hope they don't take Kate away, which I don't personally think they will. I raised the point last week, I do think post JP's death, Miguel will offer his place in Little Village as a safe haven. Same goes for D-Mac, which is who I am slightly worried about. If Tommy and Tariq are going off to do their thing in New York, LA, or wherever Legacy will be held, does that include D-Mac? I personally hope it does. I think he's been quite entertaining this season with what we saw early on, but he is still very raw and quite fresh. We still also need to see these moments here.
My man Kanan used to say, every good lie is veiled in the truth.
Tommy mentoring him and telling him that his good friend Kanan used to mention, every lie is veiled in the truth. That's a scene we're still yet to see. We need to see Tommy taking D-Mac more under his wing, especially now that he's going to be a lone wolf and out of CBI. And then you also factor in JP's death. D-Mac will no doubt have his Uncle Tommy's back going forward. The problem is, Jannard and CBI will cause absolute chaos in episode 8 and 9. Once Jannard makes his move in episode 8, he'll definitely want to finish the job. He'll be thinking, hit Tommy at the funeral, who cares who gets caught in the crossfire. We also have to remember he's back on the product, he's going to be hella high, and that is going to be affecting his judgment and his moves, which is most likely probably in episode 9. Now, if they do light up this funeral and turn it into a red funeral, anybody can get caught in the crossfire. You're talking characters like Maria. Tommy could even get hit, Kate could get hit, Miguel is also at the funeral, Genesis is also at the funeral, D-Mac, maybe even Marshall. I don't think we see Marshall at the funeral in any of the scenes that we've seen so far, but I do presume he would be there considering he is D-Mac's best mate, unless he also gets killed in episode 8. And those are two characters in particular, Genesis and Marshall, we have spoken about a lot over the past couple of weeks. We've spoken about the two a lot when it comes to D-Mac's story arc, him having consequences, losing loved ones for his character to grow. He needs to lose loved ones and he needs to feel pain. He's smiling way too much at this moment in time in episode 7, which will no doubt change with JP's death. But I am wondering if there is going to be further pain. Could it be Genesis or Marshall, maybe even both? Although hopefully not, I do think we will see a few different outcomes in the World of Power, like maybe Genesis going to Spellman like Aisha did back in Raising Kanan. A lot of us probably had Aisha as our death predictions to add to Jukebox's character arc back in Raising Kanan season 4, but they went in a completely different direction, so it definitely is possible. Again, the problem is Junkie Jannard, Double J. He's going to be high off his head and he's probably going to turn this into a red funeral. So let's talk about Junkie Jannard and the rest of CBI.
Y'all gotta pick a side and pick it right the fuck now.
Now, I do think we all know once Jannard pulls the trigger on JP, he is a dead man walking. The question isn't if, it's just when. And in case of who pulls the trigger on Jannard, will it be Tommy or will it be D-Mac? It definitely will be one of those two characters, maybe even both. Jannard is definitely out of here, that's for sure. We've seen this back and forth that he's had with Tommy since season 1. We even heard him make that threat in episode 7 as well, which we all know will never happen in a million years. I think Tommy's endgame will still be the Italians and the whole Elisa Marie story arc coming full circle, which is a topic I'm sure we'll start talking about post episode 10, depending on the events. But Jannard is definitely out here once he pulls the trigger on JP. The question is, will he cause more damage at the Red Funeral and elsewhere before he does get taken off the chessboard? We've also got CBI pouring a drink for someone. Seems like someone big within their organization is gone, maybe Jannard or maybe even Diamond. Now on Diamond, we've got him in this new scene in the trailer for episode 8 where we do see him pulling the trigger. I do think he pulls the trigger on maybe Kendra or maybe even Manny Fresh. We know he's moving very reckless at this moment in time, especially for someone who just did 15 years for selling a bad batch of product. He's now gone back to selling more bad product that has a history of killing people. It really is crazy from Diamond. But again, just like I mentioned earlier in the week, maybe this is the old Diamond. Always drinking, drunk, reckless, power hungry, more hungry for money, and he doesn't care who gets caught in the process. That goes for Kendra and maybe Manny Fresh. But the way he's moving in the final stages of Force, it just has prison written all over it. Him ending up right where he started. And for those who may not have seen the end of CBI breakdown I did earlier this week, I even raised a potential theory of Rojas' people dealing with Diamond. Because let's remember, Diamond was the one who put Rojas in this wheelchair. You can really see the storyline of the two brothers ending up with one dying and one ending up in prison. Jannard's story arc definitely has to end in death after he kills JP, and Diamond's story arc maybe ends with him back where he started. Whether he's caught for maybe Kendra's death, Jamal killing his PO, maybe Manny Fresh, or whether it's a bad batch of product that kills dozens in the streets, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme, and it really is hard not to see Diamond's story arc not ending with him in prison. But with that being said, let's move over to Vic the Snitch. Now with Vic the Snitch, this one really is a bit of a tricky one at this moment in time because we all probably thought he should have died a very long time ago, way back in season 2, but he still finds himself in the mix, just like Dre did back in Power. You would have thought Dre earned his death 5 or 10 times over. It's also going to be a very different outlook in episode 8 going forward, and I don't actually think Tommy will have his boot on Vic's neck as he previously did, or maybe he still does. The one thing about Vic we need to remember is that he still has a very big trump card. And the reason why I feel like this is a tricky one is because of something Gary Lennon teased prior to season 3. He mentioned there are many ways Vic can avoid what seems to be his destiny, which is of course death. He seems to be a character who might potentially grow in power in these last couple of episodes, maybe even work with Bobby DeFranco to try and get rid of his Tommy Egan problem. I personally think he has to get got. For him being a snitch, there's no way he survives. Again, I just think there's going to be so many twists and turns. For example, what if he does tell Jannard that he will join CBI, but instead, he helps Tommy bring them down from the inside. He double crosses CBI to help Tommy. Does that mean then Tommy then gives Vic a pass? That's just one curveball off the top of my head. They could take this in so many different directions, but well and truly, Vic definitely has to go, no doubt. Now with Shanti Showstopper, she's someone who hasn't exactly been the most loyal. We know what she was planning behind Tommy's back, but at the end of the day, she no longer has a reason to kill Tommy or work behind his back. In her best interest, it's probably best to work together, which is definitely what we're going to see in episode 8. She's a character who I can actually see surviving come the end now, because she's someone who can actually run Chicago for Tommy under Che. If Tommy needs to leave Chicago or escape because of law enforcement, because of what's in this envelope, we know Bobby DeFranco and Billy Seng will be a huge problem for Tommy going forward. There may come a time where he needs to leave because of a new threat. Maybe him and Tariq go back to New York. So why not leave Chicago in capable hands like Shanti? So I do personally have Shanti surviving and taking over CBI once Jannard and Diamond are removed from the frame. Now on Maria and her baby, I do think this is where we do need to bring in the Marquez cartel. Titus will be coming for Maria in episode 8, but we've already been through this before. I do think she does escape, and I do think she'll kill Titus in the process by running him over. So I do think it will be a wrap for Titus in episode 8. For Maria and her baby, I do still think this time will be different. Both Tommy and Miguel will definitely go to the ends of the earth to protect Maria and her baby, and when you've got two characters like this willing to put themselves on the line for you, you know you'll be well protected. I do also think Miguel will turn the tables on Roberto Ortega. He sent him that passion flower in episode 6. I still do expect him to be released, especially now that Stacey Marks is dead. That case is completely dead in the water. So I do expect him to be released maybe in episode 8 or 9, and I do expect him to come for both Miguel and Tommy. But I am expecting Roberto Ortega to die as well. That storyline definitely needs to be closed off. I just wonder whether there could be a moment where Miguel could even sacrifice himself to save Tommy. I think I raised this back in my episode 7 trailer breakdown just before episode 7. If Roberto Ortega or any members of the CBI have Tommy in their sights, I do wonder if Miguel puts his body on the line to save Tommy, because he's now going to be a father. I do think they're going to completely change our perception of Miguel's character in these last 2 or 3 episodes. And if there is someone who does die from Maria or Miguel, you'd probably have to say Miguel. So I do have Maria surviving, I do have the baby surviving as well. Titus and the Marquez cartel will be gone. And on Miguel, I personally think he will die. Again, 50-50, I am a bit conflicted because if Tommy does leave Chicago, maybe Miguel and Shanti run Chicago and have the coalition underneath them. So I am 50-50, but if I were to pick one, I do think he does die. But just before he does, I do think they would have changed the entire audience's perception of his character, because he's a man who loves family. Family means a lot to him, and he does seem like someone who would actually sacrifice himself for his family. Now I do expect there to be a lot more death. For example, characters like Manny Fresh, maybe that's who Diamond could be pointing his gun towards in episode 8. Manny Fresh or maybe Kendra. But I do expect a lot more death in episode 8, 9 and 10. Characters like Bones, Smurf, they could always be caught in this war between Tommy and CBI. There's also Raheem, other soldiers of CBI, the Marquez cartel. If the Estrada cartel get involved, maybe some of their guys too. And on the Estrada cartel, I do think Che survives, by the way. I think Joseph Sikora did do an interview. I can't remember where he did this interview. Normally I do save all the quotes and link them down below. But I came across an interview a while ago where he mentioned Mexico and how they could branch out in the world of power because they now have a connect out there in Che. So I do think that was a hint. Maybe they could do something in Mexico in the future, but also the fact that Che will most likely survive. But that's a wrap for the death predictions pack. Some storylines and characters that I'm conflicted on, but I do think we'll see a mixture of death, prison, and characters surviving who may potentially show up in the world of power in a future spin-off. With that being said, the floor is now yours. Drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section. I know you guys have a lot of death predictions of your own, so get them down below. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.